Hey everyone, welcome to I guess an ecosystem session plus a introduction of Unyt, the Org Building Holo Fuel V2. So today with me I have Matt Schutte, Jared Holtz, and Art Brock, and we plus a couple of other people behind the scenes are the Unyt team. So it's great to be here. Actually, it's been very exciting last few weeks. I think we had our last live stream in early December, and we were going to come. We were coming back to this live stream with. We said we'd come back to talk about testing, etc., and everything that's been going on. And actually, we'll come back. We're got the organization running. We've got our name of Unyt accounting, which has all come from understanding that we talked about last time, where especially the space around decentralized hosting, and not just decentralized hosting, but other physical infrastructure, Wi-Fi, social. There's such a big push for the movement of infrastructure to go to the edge. And what we have is a series of people, projects, and industries that really understand to do that, you need some kind of accounting and some kind of capture of activity and value that meets the requirements of this infrastructure. And that could be things like async, could be offline, it could be in hardy environments, it could be completely global, etc. So in recognizing that demand and supporting not just Holo, but other projects that are starting to scale and are running into the limitations of blockchain, we've been building away on Unyt accounting, and it's enabling some transparent distributed accounting for projects and alliances of projects which would like to share a common accounting unit. And I guess one way you could think about it is, like we talked about in the previous call, things like frequent flyer miles, and then alliances where you would have the common unit of the mile, and then the alliance, which is beneficial to be able to share that unit in the way they operate the rest of their business. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about the first product that we're building, and then I'll jump in and talk some about testing progress.
Yeah, cool. So just to clarify one thing, because Unyt accounting, the way we're talking about it, could sound like the product. That's actually the organization. The first product is we're calling it Piecework Tracker. That's piece as in pieces, like pieces of a puzzle or something like that. And piecework accounting is actually something that exists. It is basically outcome-based accounting, where you're keeping track of results produced, and then people get paid for results. So this was stuff that emerged in the industrial age on, like assembly lines, and also things like sweatshops, people sewing clothes, where you'd have people assembling different pieces, and then you turn in your stack of pieces that you've built, and you get paid for the pieces that you've done. And so when you look at um, like deep in projects, decentralized physical infrastructure projects as production networks, you have different people providing pieces of value, right? Serving out, providing storage and serving storage, or servicing requests, or providing GPU processing, or different kinds of things like that. And you can log and track the value provided, and then turn in your essentially your proof of service as the pieces of value, and be able to be compensated in another currency. Like this has been known in the past as Holo Fuel, but it would be the reference currency for that particular Piecework Tracker instance, because there's going to be different groups, different alliances. We already have multiple groups wanting to use this. Our first focus is on the deep in group that the Holo hosting network is going to be a part of, but it ends up functioning like we showed in the last video, or in the last call. We had a picture of sort of a swimming pool with different swim lanes. That's one metaphor you could look at it. You could also look at it as like a factory with different production lines, and you have an underlying unit of energy that's powering all the production lines, right? You've got the water wheel that's actually moving the production lines, or you've got the generators or electricity that's actually, powering the system. That's the reference unit, the base unit in the system. And then there's other units, because this does multi-unit accounting, that are being tracked, that are like what's being the outcomes being produced on the production lines. So this really, what this does is power new networks of production. And you can think of networks as production, like really taking modern infrastructure into the fully decentralized frame. So if you think about the kind of infrastructure that we have today that we rely on all over the place, like electricity coming into our homes, and telecom connections, internet or phone lines, water and plumbing, roads and infrastructure that we use for transportation, those are all managed typically through government or private corporations. And it's like these production networks are sort of the modern replacement of this kind of thing. Maybe we could even get to the point where we can manage more of our infrastructure that way. We already have, energy networks that are interested in being online. So that could be one of the places that it starts. And Piecework Tracker is basically transactional accounting of all of those units involved in producing the value, and then outcome-based, results-based pay for that. David, do you want to talk about where we're at on testing?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Art. Yeah, it's very exciting. The vision that you're outlining, and so one of the big changes that we've made in terms of how we operate is moving rapidly into testing and feedback environment. So we've now got more than a dozen groups all testing various parts of this first application. As I alluded to, it's mainly we're not focused on the front end as much right now. So we've got a baseline of back-end functionality which people are able to test, but we're not really focused right now on user friendliness. And what we're testing for is essentially like one, feedback around back-end functionality, two, getting an insight on how people are using things. So as we're building out the front end, we're building it from use, not just from our hypotheses, and starting to build a picture on what feature completeness is for the requirements of the deep-in projects. That gives us a sense of what is going to be needed for pretty rapidly for the beta style users, as well as for this deep-in group that's part where Holo would be part of. As I said, so it's about a dozen organizations. You can also catch, like, for example, Nick from Hum is pretty active in Telegram, going through how things are going for Hum, but also giving feedback on beta testing. And I'm sure other people are going to be on Telegram, X, or Discord also giving their feedback. So if you're not a part of the testing group, then you can also track testing in some of those social channels. We were hoping for five or six we wanted to start with. So 12 has been a really, really solid number. And then we're also using the test results and progress to keep building those relationships with the beta testing group and the broader groups to bring them on, because as everyone would know, even while you're doing alpha, you've also got all sorts of other conversations, business development, etc., for the larger scale adopters, and they need to be seeing this process. So very, very exciting and great to be building with everybody and get fantastic progress and feedback so far. And as Art was saying, I think in the prep, we've moved very far, very fast. And certainly compared to previous AMAs, it would always be like, oh, great, okay, well, we did AMA and then we're going to come back, and it's kind of like, oh, well, we said we'll be testing, but we've encountered a few issues. But actually, not only are we testing, and we got to testing a few weeks earlier than expected, but also testing like technology that's better than we expected to be testing at this stage, and that'll come up. What exactly we're building will come up, and some of the evolutions will come up in the answering of the questions. So unless Matt or Jared, you have anything to add, we can go into the Q&A.
I just want to throw one thing in. You already mentioned that, this isn't a fancy front end. I want to give the disclaimer for anybody who ends up, because actually we're not even hiding all this. This isn't all visible on GitHub and stuff right now, but this is very much a front end built by a back end developer. So you can reach all the features, but it's kind of clunky buttons and all that kind of
Yep,
stuff. And we definitely a part of what we're doing is collecting some usability feedback and working through the user journeys to make it a smooth UX for people. And that part's missing at the moment, but the functionality is there.
yep, yep. All right, Matt or Jared, anything you guys wanted to add, or do you want to just jump into the questions? All right. Well, we've got a bet that we can finish in under an hour, which we've never done before. So let's see. That's why they're not answering. That's why they're not contributing. All right. So Silver asked, how long will this testing with partners approximately take before launch? So Jared.
So yeah, so a lot of this question's kind of been answered already, but I'll go through it again and maybe with a little bit different perspective, give some help to answering it. So as David mentioned, we're going to be testing with multiple partners in different phases over the next several months. And it'll be different partners oftentimes in those different phases too, as different portions of the software are more mature for particular partners. So the first phase is very much about basic functionality, as Art just said, and then the next phase will be rolling more into UX and UI testing, which I think will make it more visible even for many of our partners, and they'll actually be able to provide more robust feedback. And so each of those phases is a little bit different. But as mentioned, the development has been going really fast, which we're thrilled by. And so that in some ways speaks towards the trajectory that we're on. But a full launch of the unit accounting software doesn't just include the software, but also includes the first alliance and also Holo Fuel, which is probably what Silver's interested in. And that delivery involves multiple stakeholders, so it's not just us. It's actually a collaboration between multiple parties that are in this testing process over the next several months. So naming an actual date, I think, would be foolhardy at this point, and also without having full partnership with others on what that date will be, obviously inaccurate and not honoring of that relationship. So at a base level, we're moving fast. We're going through multiple phases of testing. We'll keep you apprised of what is happening with the testing. We'll be sharing some demo videos, and so you get a better sense for where we're at. And then hopefully we'll actually be able to hear more from our partners as we get farther along in that testing and working towards whatever you define as launch. Go ahead, Art.
Yeah, I just want to say that there actually may be multiple types of launches. I think there are some projects that have come that have connected to this that are looking to use this a little bit more internally, and therefore they don't need to wait for some of the features that we're needing Holochain to certify, like warrants. So we're not needing countersigning to be certified right now in this version of the tool. So that problem is eliminated, but we are waiting for warrants to be certified in the kind of industrial strength testing process that the Holochain Foundation folks are going through. And so we probably won't launch any more public and open networks until some of those underlying certifications, but there will probably be groups, maybe you call it a soft launch, that are using this more internally, and it'll be ready for their use because it's already used in a sort of trusted network of people who know each other, and they're not worried about malicious actors coming in and trying to attack the system. And so we don't have to have the same level of audits and certifications for some of these groups to start using it.
Yeah, which is exactly the why this whole process makes sense. Because having to start and get to a currency that's swappable for, $500 million worth of value without also going through other iterations in other use cases is, this is a really solid way of approaching that. Okay, so actually coming to that, will new Holo Fuel be a generalized version? Can it be used to build other mutual credit currencies? Matt, this is from Christian.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, as Art had mentioned earlier, with Piecework, we are working to make it easier for a variety of communities to be able to implement their own mutual credit accounting systems. So yes, this will be a more generalized approach, right? That we're building a more generalized framework for building mutual credit accounting systems that your community can make use of for its own internal needs. That said, our initial focus is on supporting a DePIN community that's making use of Holo Fuel V2, including Holohost, but alongside some other DePIN-oriented projects as well.
All right, and another one for you, Matt. So Robson, Jared, I'm assuming these are all questions from Telegram and other places over the last. I feel bad mentioning their name without where they're coming from.
Well, it's more of a hat tip for them as an individual than as,
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Really. Perfect. Okay. Cool. So Robinson's asking, will you look to make Holo Fuel V2 a viable solution for the high-speed, high-volume token microtransactions that will soon be needed between AI agents? Could be a distributed value exchange service that you could offer to AI companies as agents become more mainstream in the next year. Matt.
Yeah, that's definitely a use case that feels like a natural fit for Holo Fuel V2 or for the Piecework software more generally. That is a good complement to the decentralized cloud hosting that Holohost is making available. We are working to support initiatives in that direction, but it is still early, right? We're doing testing. We'll be working with the Holohost team to determine which specific other projects are a fit for Holo Fuel V2. But that context of really high volumes, very small transaction values is a really solid fit. I mean, it's why it was the main thing driving us into designing Holo Fuel the way we have in the first place. So yeah, and the way that the world is moving, I totally agree. There's going to be a lot more of that activity going on and needed. And so there'll be need for that, especially in sort of decentralized AI contexts. So I'll leave it there. But yes, yeah, that seems like a viable space. Arthur.
Yeah, you actually said right at the end kind of what I wanted to add, the decentralized AI projects especially. So there are, just like there's DePIN projects that have raised money with a capitalization token and then, end up maybe needing lighter weight accounting for activity happening internally. I think there's AI projects in a similar position because all the buzz around AI, there's decentralized AI projects that have raised money with a token. And now as they get to the point where they need to scale, they're finding that that's where you need a tool like the Piecework accounting.
I really want to contribute, but I'm committed to the time.
Contribute. The contribution is important. We're ahead of time. Look how far ahead of schedule we are.
I think one thing that the aspirational nature of this, or the expansive nature on this, is important to touch on. Partly because when we're thinking about and talking about DePIN accounting, and it's almost the way we're thinking about it is then the tools for like a decentralized organization or connecting resources from community resources through this kind of umbrella. But actually, one of the things that's very exciting about even this underlying pattern and simple application is its capability to then be layered with different types of organizations, people, community, etc., into creating new forms of collaboration, or new forms of organization. And I think like that's also where the AI interplay comes in, where what will start to happen is it will change the types of collaboration and coordination that are possible, and therefore it starts to further change what we think is possible for an organization. I think like this is where Unyt has such an interesting role. So while we're very focused and heads down on this wave of testing, moving towards Holo Fuel V2, etc., part of those exploratory conversations are being able to take, again, like the promise of what you could do with a DAO or with your ability to coordinate on a blockchain and actually move it into production and operations, which is where value comes from those activities. So being able to operate at that level is the thing that starts to change the game in terms of what types of organizations are able to be built. So anyway, sorry for the segue. I just couldn't hold off. Okay, so Andy is asking when we'll be able to redeem our Holo Fuel certificates.
So
Jared.
this is a question. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a question we've answered already, maybe indirectly. And I know it's a question that a lot of folks in the community are interested in. So I'm going to give a simple answer, but hopefully you can hear the basic steps in it that are kind of necessary in order to get to that redeeming Holo Fuel point. So we're not going to share a specific date for that redemption moment, but it will by definition have to come after Piecework tracking is launched and being used by the DePIN Alliance that Holo is part of. So there's kind of like multiple steps to get there. And I just want to like note that there's these big milestones, right? And so it's not like we went, after the restructuring, it's not like we went and created a new organization and now all Unyt has to do is sprint towards launch. There's actually these other milestones that are involved that are deeply collaborative with other organizations. So just want to like triple underline that collaboration. And we think that's actually really powerful in both the short, medium, and long term, even though it might feel like the date's just, pushing off into the future. So I want to just, that's what I got.
Cool. Okay. And then is testing going to happen with clients to obtain better feedback or more internal testing, and for how long?
Yeah, so similar question to above, but basic answer is yes. So testing's absolutely going to happen with clients, already starting to happen along those lines as we shared. It's going to happen in multiple phases. And of course, we're doing internal testing. I know at least Matt, Art, and I, as well as Joelle, have all tested multiple times this week. So it's almost daily testing in one form or another. And we're letting those test groups also know that there's kind of like evolving releases that are taking into account some of their feedback already. So it's kind of very quick iterative process right now.
All right, so this one's from not Matt, but another Matt. You said there is a lot of demand. That's why Holo Fuel expanded to the next version. Would it be possible to also use it for async and offline transactions, Art?
Yeah, the version that we've built here in the Piecework tracker is not using live countersigning, so both parties don't have to be on at the same time. It would depend on some of the validation rules that you might put in play if you want to be able to double check against network state, but fundamentally it's taking advantage of the fact that Holochain is a local first implementation and you can take actions locally. So yes, you can do asynchronous transactions. People don't have to be online together, but you also have the possibility of not having to be online at all. You certainly can do a send that way. You may not be able to do a receive that way, in that you have to be able to have seen the transaction. If you have seen the transaction and have it cached locally, you could then commit the receive to your chain. And I know that this is a little bit funny that most people are not used to a two-step thing. Like in the blockchain world, it's just send. But because this is agent-centric, both agents have to update their state, right? So you can do a send, but it won't show in the receiving agent's state until they acknowledge the send. They point to it and say, see, this was sent to me. Now my balance has moved up, and so it's actually a two-step send and receive process. So you could for sure do a send when you're offline. And if you've got the data cached, you could perform a receive offline, or another configuration, if both parties, the sender and receiver, are on their own little local network, but not connected to the rest of the network, you should be able to complete the transaction, both the send and the receive. So in that sense, offline from the internet, but online with each other. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Intern asks, Art, again for you, does this mean that the Holochain technical issue that you said in the last Holo Fuel AMA was not stable enough for Holo Fuel to work fully has been resolved?
I believe the one that they're talking about here may be countersigning. And like I mentioned in the intro earlier, when we were talking about piecework, we're actually not using countersigning in this. We're doing a two-step process of a send and a receive instead of having the sender and receiver sign a single transaction, countersign a single transaction. So it being a two-step process has made it async, and we don't no longer need to wait for countersigning to be certified. We still do need warrants certified. Warrants are basically what protects a malicious actor, somebody who's taken a bad action, from being able to ever benefit from that action. Um, the validation is built into Holochain right now, so it would detect that something is invalid. But if you really want then for that person to essentially be blocked from usage by everyone else, the warrants, the information that this person has taken an invalid action need to circulate. And so we're still waiting for that to be fully certified in order for this to be used for high value uh, open networks where you don't have trust or relationship between the parties.
Art, can you just go a little bit more into working versus certified in terms of features like warrants?
Yeah, so there's an implementation of warrants that has been working for the past, I don't know what it is now, 13, 14 months or something like that is there and does circulate warrants and that kind of thing. But it hasn't got all of the degree of testing and performance testing and profiling that they want out of the systems right now, that they're basically trying to put like industrial strength certifications on this and say we've got enough variety of testing, performance testing, corner case testing, all of the possible ways that this could go wrong. We've covered all those angles. Um, and they're not certifying that yet. And actually, I think they're looking at potentially a slightly simplified implementation, um, and making it easier to certify that simplified implementation. So that's the difference between working and certified. There's all kinds of features like they actually didn't certify. I don't know where the status is right now, but they started off uncertifying sharding, even though we've been using Holochain sharded for years, but they were saying we don't have every case tested. We know that there's a few times where it seems like some data isn't replicating. We don't know if that's because of sharding or what. So we're going to start with being able to certify gossip and publishing in an unsharded scenario, and then move to certification of sharded scenario. And so it's a process where they basically took everything that, even though it had been working, and said we're calling everything unknown until we can put enough tests around it to mark it fully covered and known. And so that's the difference between kind of working and certified. There may be features that are now marked as experimental. It doesn't mean they don't work. It just means they aren't certified yet.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Art. Very important process to also go through as kind of the underline that we're relying on. Okay, so Silver is asking, 1 second, I just wanted to check my color coordination here. So Silver's asking Jared, Holo Host with Holo Fuel was set to launch in Q3 2024. And this is planned before partnering with other projects that want to back up Holo Fuel. And this change has caused a delay, but how much of the currency design work for Holo Fuel prior to this partnership has been used to develop the new Holo Fuel V2 currency? I'm not sure if everything had to start from scratch or most of the work had been done. He's asking because develop this kind of currency the first time seems very complex. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Hopefully I did justice to the question.
Yeah, it's kind of like a long winding question, but part of the reason why I included all of it, sometimes we pare the questions back so they're clear for the whole audience, but part of the reason why I wanted to include this is, and it creates a bit of a talking point, I think, for how quickly we might be able to develop this in comparison to past versions of Holo Fuel. So, a better way to think of that is, rather than just being complex, is kind of right there in the name. This is V2. That's how we framed it. The V stands for version, so Holo Fuel version 2. So it's easier to think of this latest Holo Fuel as a significant update based on the past learnings of the past years. So it might be V2, but it's years of work and learnings that have gone into this version. And you might have even noticed, if you were paying close attention in the whole Telegram, or you happen to see the Unyt repo, that our main dev Joel, who's been working on Holo Fuel basically since the beginning, cheekily renamed it to HFVZ because he feels like he's gone through many iterations, many versions, right? Even if that's not how we had communicated about it publicly. Like he's done a lot of learning over the last several years around Holo Fuel. So yeah, it is complex, but in a lot of ways, like, we've improved and learned that entire time. And so we feel like this version is actually going to be quicker, lighter, and easier to develop in a lot of ways because of all of that learning over the past years with Joel and other team members, for sure.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in about the complexity, it's actually less complex in a certain sense. I mean, part of what we did, we did not reuse any of the code. We did start from scratch. We simplified the data model significantly, and we simplified all the rules and validations significantly, because we moved a lot of that configuration of kind of the rules and behavior of the currency into raves. Again, raves are sort of holochain counterpart to smart contracts. They are records of agreements verifiably executed, so that we could put, the transaction fee collection, the credit limit calculations, the service fee verifications, the proofs of deposit of outside funds, like all these different kinds of features, which got hard coded into Holo Fuel, got stripped out and are now put in little raves. So they're lightweight modules that can be customized. So the baseline mutual credit accounting currency is actually quite simplified, except for a scope change that we added when we recognized this more as piecework accounting, when we made it multi-unit. So we started off actually rebuilding this, thinking more in terms of Holo Fuel version 2 and just having a single unit. And then as we recognized, really what we were doing is this piecework thing, it now is multi-unit accounting. And so that is the one piece of complexity that's been added. Everything else has actually been simplified.
Art, can you just, for I know you made it visible a little bit earlier in a previous comment, but give an example in the Holo Fuel context of what those other units, those other pieces might be?
Yeah. So the idea is, first of all, in an alliance, that there's going to be different groups that have different types of service units or pieces that they are tracking. If we just take Holo hosting as an example, you may have, for example, web requests, or you could think of them as Zoom calls. Technically, they're a Zoom call, but in the normal web service, you'd think of it as a web request. Somebody's sending a request to the web server. Web server has to do work and send a response, right? So you could be tracking the number of web requests. You could be tracking the flops, the mega flops, the operations, the number of CPU operations being performed, right? You can be tracking the bandwidth usage. You can be tracking the number of users and user chains that you're storing. You can be tracking, like, all of those are the kinds of pieces that a host reports their logging of the interactions for payment. They turn in these pieces. And what we interestingly are doing with this multi-unit accounting now is that literally they're sending, I did this bandwidth, I did this, processing, number of units of processing, I answered this number of requests, and they're set that, and that's being distilled from the logs, and those are actually being sent as if it's a currency. And then the sponsor payor of the app is sending the reference unit as payment and receiving the megabytes and megaflops and rub requests. And so what they get to see in their balance is that we can actually show charts, and we can show charts over time, so you can see activity levels and all that kind of stuff. You, without having to go look at logs and analyze logs, you can actually see the economic activity of all of these kinds of units in the system. So we can actually summarize them and display them, all that kind of stuff in the accounting system without having to like go process web logs stuff.
Yeah, and the pricing of all of that will have been set in a price sheet, right?
Yeah.
So if it was, I'm charging this much per web request, or I'm charging this much for, a certain amount of floating point operations, the CPU usage stuff. Great. And so I, as somebody who's paying for those services, I end up seeing, hey, I spent this much Holo Fuel, but I got this many requests, this much processing, this much bandwidth, etc. Cool. Cool. Thanks, Art.
So Matt, when Sam is asking when Holo Fuel V2 is going live and what does the 25 roadmap look like?
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, we're on track to have the underlying software functionality ready within the next few months. There are dependencies such as certification of warrants that are ongoing, but we're simultaneously pulling together other partners, not only in the testing, but some of them to join alongside Holohost in the Holo Fuel V2 pool. I recognize this question was specifically about Holo Fuel V2, right? There are other pools, people are trying to pull together as well, but one of our main focuses is pulling together that Holo Fuel V2 process. And there will also be a process of those partners working to integrate and interface with Holo Fuel V2 before it goes live, right? So they've got stuff to implement as well. So the actual launch date, as Jared had mentioned earlier, is going to be determined by all those steps as well. We don't, unfortunately, we don't have the authority really to tell other people when they're going to launch their thing. And since it's not even just our longtime partners at Holohost, it's also the other folks that are part of that pool. It's going to be determined by them in partnership with one another.
And question, will Holo Fuel Piecework unit be open source? From the dev Discord.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We did not make the last version of Holo Fuel open source because we didn't want essentially a proliferation of shitcoins where somebody just copies a repo and deploys something thinking that they understand how the validation model works or whatever, because it's so different than many other currencies. But because this is so vanilla, and then the implementation is really happening in the raves, and the raves are inherently open source, so you can go look at the contents of a rave because everybody has to be able to see that the content was executed correctly. They have to be open source. It's pushed so much of the configuration into this modular path that I think there's not much danger in us just open sourcing it, and that allows this to be used by communities and all that kind of stuff. There's a question about also the license that it would be under, and we're probably just going to put it under like a standard Apache 2 license, but also have a reminder that Holochain, this is a Holochain application, is running on Holochain, and Holochain is running under the CAL, the Cryptographic Autonomy License, and therefore you still have to comply with the CAL if you're using Holochain to make sure that users have control of their private keys. You also can't divorce them from their source chain data. They own the data they've authored. That's some of the provisions of the CAL.
Another one, so Sarah's asking, when I heard about the organization split into three, I was frustrated, but only after a few months I can clearly see how much more beneficial Holo Fuel V2 being a separate entity is. It was locked into only being Holo Fuel, the currency design is only fueling its own network. That's fine, but it's a bit alienating. But if I've understood Holo Fuel V2 correctly, it means any project can access your mutual credit accounting app and use it for their own benefit.
Exactly. So having made this more general purpose piecework accounting, it's proving to be way more valuable to more projects and more people. And so in the end, I think that will make Holo Fuel more valuable and certainly more functional. We're going to have more groups testing it, more groups contributing to it. And some of the groups we have right now, like I think it may be worth mentioning one. Quorum One, quorum.one, if you want to look at them. They are about enabling small groups, enabling startups, enabling community projects, and they are probably going to be in some ways a distribution partner for this. We're actually working with some of their designers, UX designers and stuff there to work on the UX for this, and they're really excited because they want to use this tool and be able to bring it to a bunch of their projects. So we already, like we said, we targeted having 5 or 6 projects testing. We're now getting more like a dozen, and it looks like we're already having people wanting to be able to use this with more projects. So the utility of this is spreading. I mean, like it's definitely better than just being our own little private currency for one network.
Yep, completely agree. Okay, Belinda is asking if I was ever to find myself in an elevator with Richard Branson and I had 60 seconds to get his company interested in Holo Fuel V2 without using terms like agent-centric, peer-to-peer, mutual credit, or smart contracts, what could I say to him? Well, I'll take a go, but please others too. So I'd just say, have you ever wished that that accounting, and it was to be Richard Branson, so I'd ever say, have you ever wished that your accounting across the Virgin group was transparent and allowed interconnections with all sorts of other people, organizations, value creation, production? Yeah. And Unyt enables things like everyday things like loyalty points, activity, productive work, attribution, reputation to be transparent, community operated, decentralized, and interoperable. That'll be my little pitch. I'm sure if I thought about it a little bit longer, because the real pitch is in value. And I alluded to this before. So obviously now they'd be fascinated and stop the elevator and want to continue. But over time, what we're really doing is we're showing the value of creating, and I guess in the elevator, we're really saying, like, in 6 months' time, we start to be able to tell a different story about the value of the decentralized, transparent accounting system and what it can enable, right? And so right now we're talking about, like, we know people are excited about it. We know people are testing it. We know that we're working towards, and we've got ideas on what can materialize. But the real pitch is when we've got those first ideas crystallizing and we're able to express the transformation, value, new things being created, and this being partly an enabler of that.
I'm just imagining a pitch so good that it has Richard Branson pulling the emergency stop in an elevator in a place that he would be.
I think the first one might not be done. I'm imagining the accounting of of productive work across the Virgin Group, whatever that really looks like, is very complicated and doesn't now allow for like the seamless plug-in of new people or new businesses and all sorts of things. So I would hope that the first sentence would work. But not the hearts and minds, huh? It's just a bit operational. Okay, so John is asking, do businesses have to be fully decentralized to use this tech? Or how would Holo Fuel V2 work with a centralized system?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So no, businesses do not have to be fully decentralized to use this tech. This tech is decentralized, right? But you don't have to be. At the end of the day, this is accounting software. And it can be structured to enable different actors, whether businesses or individuals, to create value for one another. Right? Recognize contributions with payment and use the demonstration of credibility, right? The ability to provide value for others to gain access to credit. Mutual credit is different from how most payment systems work today, but it isn't crazy hippie tech, right? Despite the long hair. The father of like modern macroeconomics, John Maynard Keynes, he pushed for the global reserve currency to be structured as mutual credit at the end of World War II. Now he didn't win that fight, but that was what he was pushing on behalf of. And that sort of, international settlement mostly involves large centralized corporations and governments engaging in transactions with one another. So that's an example of how, hey, you don't have to be a decentralized thing in order to use a decentralized accounting system. More recently, local communities around the world have made use of these kinds of systems, whether in paper form or using centralized computer systems for fostering increased local economic activity through Michael Linton's Let's local exchange trading service or localized exchange trading service. That started in like over 40 years ago, right, in the early 1980s, and got adopted by thousands of communities around the world, right? So no, the participants don't need to be decentralized, but having the accounting system be both computerized and decentralized has a number of benefits, including having machines take care of the boring validation tasks that humans tend not to enjoy and that we aren't always so good at, but also ensuring that the power dynamic within the system doesn't tend to lean towards concentration and abuse, at least not at the level of the accounting system. And that's not how our existing payment systems work so much. Yeah, Arthur.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and kind of tie it back to the Richard Branson question as well. That that one way you could look at this is as NRP, Network Resource Planning System. So maybe the Virgin Group has a really expensive ERP system that crosses all of the Virgin Group things. I have no idea. I don't know what their infrastructure is like. But we live in a networked age, and we're still using accounting that silos every organization, that isn't cross-organizational, where you have to do your transactions and then you separately do your own internal private accounting. The transactions themselves can't service as the account record. But if you're doing transactions on something like Holochain that's creating an immutable, auditable, cryptographically signed, tamper-proof record, the transactions themselves can be your account record. You don't need separate accounting. You just need a way of pulling reports and views on that. And so this is far more connected to like REA accounting, which you might have heard us talk about before, which is a later accounting standard that was created in the 80s. When we talked about Unyt accounting as an entity and this Piecework tracker being the first product, there will be other products down the line because we are seeing demand for things like this cross-organizational accounting and that kind of thing. So we have future products planned to meet some of these niches. And so do expect to hear from those down the road after we've delivered this and gotten this all up and running.
Jared, do we want to go through those? Like, I can see 3 more questions at the bottom. Should we rattle through them quickly, or would you prefer? No? Cool.
Could be end time.
Yeah, I think so. Oh yeah, there you go. I think we should just end. Fabulous. Okay, well, please reach out. Thank you very much for everyone. Please reach out on any social channel if you want to ask further questions, if you want to get involved in testing or know someone who wants to get involved in testing as well. I think there's going to be some of the testing videos shared over the next few weeks, and so you can also keep track of progress there. Matt, Jared, Art, anything else to add before we close off?
I do kind of want to speak to one of the questions here that was live, the Sam DeBrune question. Can we guarantee a launch this time around instead of like more pivots or more extensions and that kind of thing? And we can guarantee people will be using it. I think even the frame of reference of a launch, as if there's going to be one event, like what we're creating a product that we already have a dozen groups lined up for testing and use. There will be people that start using this product. When Holo puts the Holo network on, I can't, but we in this call can't promise, because that's not actually in our control. We're trying to make sure we have the infrastructure, transactional infrastructure ready for them, and then they need to actually also integrate that and join an alliance and that kind of thing. And we're trying to get all that stuff set up too, but there's multiple moving parts. But this is no longer just about one launch. This is about a product serving many people, and we know that that's going to happen. I think that is a guarantee that we can make.
Yep. All I add is, yeah, it's very different when you're, instead of building for one particular case that has reliance on a whole series of requirements and other people, etc. Like we were before. Now we're able to just iterate, progress. So firstly, Holo Fuel becomes better inevitably because it's based on feedback from a whole series of other people. It doesn't mean we pack in all sorts of additional features, etc., and it becomes bloated. It actually becomes better because the different eyes, different testing, more people, much more diversity, and like we're talking about, we've got a whole network engaged now. Right. So instead of doing everything internally, we have a network of people that are engaged, giving feedback, and that's forcing things to be better and faster. It's also way more engaging and enjoyable a process for everybody, which also which leads to faster, tighter feedback loops, which leads to a better product. So it's a different environment that we're working in. As Art says, like we will be releasing because we're consistently releasing, and now we've got people testing who want to bring something to market, right? And they want to be running these accounting systems themselves. So I think we're onto a very good thing in terms of how we're working and what we're working on. And yeah, it's been great to share the progress. Oh, Art again.
Yeah, sorry, I just realized that we should make an invitation, now that people have a better understanding of what piecework tracking actually does. There may be people listening who have projects that this would apply to, or people who may be running into some scaling issues, or maybe wanting the internal accounting. And so if you want to get into our testing program, you should contact us or have them contact us, because we are lining up groups and we are wanting feedback from a variety of projects. So just realized we should make that explicit invitation.
Yep.
Jared,
feel free to reach out in the Holo Telegram. Both Dave and I are roaming there and trying to pick up on any questions. If we miss something, just ask again or have someone else to point to it or something like that.
Super.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Matt, Art, and Jared. And look forward to catching up in an ecosystem session shortly. And stay tuned for updates and get involved in the testing.
Thanks all. Take care.
Thanks.